Praise be to Jesus Christ and welcome to Catholic Forum. I'm your host, Deacon Jim Thorndell. I'd like to welcome all those who are joining us on public TV and those who might be joining us on podcasts. It is always our privilege to be joining you and have you invite us into your home or your car, wherever you may be, and to really help us explore the understanding of our Catholic faith. Many times we think of our Catholic faith, we think of the Mass, we think of the sacraments, we think of the clergy, we might think of our churches, the basilicas, all the cathedrals. But it's more than that. The Catholic Church is really about the people. The people are the church. And it's the understanding that the lay people are really a driving force for our church from the ground up. And that's where the church swells in its numbers. It becomes very a powerful understanding that it's through the laity that our church continues to grow and thrive. And today I have with me two people who really have that profound understanding. I have Steve and Pam Strobel with me. Nice to have you here.
Hello, Deacon Jim. Thank you for having us.
Good to have you here. You know, we're talking about the Catholic Church being driven by lay people, and I can think of no two better people really to say that to than you two, because you really are an inspiration. Now, I know, Pam, you are the director at St. Isidore's in the Life Catholic Homeschool Co-op.
That's correct.
That's right. How long have you been doing that?
Actually, it's 5 years now. 5
years. And you're teaching Steve how to be part of that, correct?
He's my right-hand man right here. So.
That's wonderful. You know, before we get into the understanding of a co-op, let's find out about Pam and Steve. How long have you been married?
26 and a half years.
26, you know that right off the bat.
Yes.
Yes.
26 and a half years, isn't that wonderful?
It's been a blessing.
Cradle Catholics?
Cradle Catholic, but a revert.
You're the revert?
He's
I'm the revert.
Well, welcome home.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. You know,
back.
I wish we had a little more time to really have the joy of understanding what brought you back, but I'm sure that there was many events in your life that brought you back and seeing the fullness of the truth in the Catholic Church.
Amen.
Oh,
Yes.
that's wonderful. So, children, any children?
We have 7 children,
7
Deacon
children.
Jim, ages 24 to 10.
Oh my gosh.
It's been a joy, and it's amazing that they're growing up so big, and they keep telling me, Mom, I'm almost tall as you now. The last 3 at least, because the other ones have already passed me up. So.
Isn't that amazing how fast that time goes?
It does.
Yes.
You know, you see the joy of your children, and they're all unique in their own ways. They all bring their own gifts to the table every day, don't they?
They do.
And you almost wonder, how did I not appreciate some of that time earlier? But you're always busy. And particularly when we're going to talk about it, homeschooling and co-op there. So, you know, here we are in a world that our public education is kind of in jeopardy. Right. We're in a crisis in our education with our children. Our Catholic schools are starting to grow again, but we still have a problem there too. But there's really a rise and an increase of homeschooling. And I'd like to talk about that with you, both of you on here.
Sure.
Because I think it's a paramount for our viewers to understand the decision that you made, why you made it, and the ramifications of what you do as homeschooling.
Yeah.
So let's start this way. When did you first have an inkling that maybe there was something other than public or Catholic education that you wanted for your children? I shouldn't say Catholic education. I should say institutional Catholic education.
Yes. I'm going to go back a little bit with that. It all started when we were expecting our 3rd child.
Okay.
And Pam was still working full-time as administrator over at Aquinas College.
Okay.
And we realized very quickly that her working full-time was not going to be able to something that we'd be able to continue doing after we had our 3rd child, Nicole. So she retired, if you will, from her full-time position.
January of 1995.
Yeah.
Wow, she remembers.
I remember.
And at that time, our oldest daughter was, I believe, 4 years old, and we were really starting to consider, what are we going to do for education? We're parishioners at St. Thomas the Apostle Parish, and St. Thomas has a great Catholic school that has some great leadership over the years, and we're
I'm prejudiced though, because that's my parish.
That's my parish too. So we're very proud of what they've done there at the school, and that was definitely an option we considered. But we really pray that God, show us what you want us to do with our children and their education. And it's amazing when we started praying that we were introduced to so many people that were homeschooling over the next year. It
was really amazing.
They just came out of the woodwork, if you will. So.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing for us is when that was happening, and here, you know, I have a master's degree, you know, and I was well educated and worked for 8 years at Aquinas, and it was like, what can I do to continue to use my education? And as Steve said, we met all these homeschoolers, and it was like, this is something we probably could do. And when we prayed, and even at that time, Steve's job led him to do training. They did more of that back in the early 90s. And, he'd be gone maybe 4 weeks of a year. And so, gosh, if we homeschool, we could go with him to Philadelphia. We could go with him to Boston.
Yes.
And to Colorado and make that an experience for the whole family.
Of course.
And that's really what God's prompting us to say, let's do this. So I started out as with a kindergartner way back when.
Go ahead.
So it wasn't, some people homeschool for different reasons.
Right.
But in our situation, it wasn't we were anti-institutional Catholic school, because we did have a good Catholic school that was available to us. Praise be to God for Dave Faber and Susie Furtwanger, who have led the school so faithfully over the years. But it was really our desire to become more involved with our children's education, and that's where God was leading us.
Now let me ask you this question. Here you are, both educated, have a lot of knowledge between you. Did you ever anticipate what it was going to take to homeschool? I mean, you must have had to put some thought into that too, because it's not just getting the literature and start teaching.
No.
It really required much more, and so you had to prepare yourself for this.
Exactly. And it was such a blessing, because at that time, and still today, but there was a large Catholic homeschool conference that met every summer.
Right.
And it was the shot in the arm, resources, great speakers, who would give you a format of what to do. I'm really biased about Laura Berkowitz, her program from the Mother Divine Grace School out in California. Her husband helped start St. Thomas, the Thomas Aquinas College out there.
Yes.
Real fine institution. And so it was those individuals and other Catholic homeschoolers in the Grand Rapids area who said, you can do this, and this is the material available to you. And that was, over about 20 years ago now. So, and things have just changed and skyrocketed since then about the available resources, put it that way.
Exactly. Steve, you had to jump in both feet on this too, correct? Now I understand you work for Steel Takes, correct?
I do, yes.
And you do some traveling.
Yes.
Okay, so sometimes that takes you away from the home.
It does.
But on occasion, your family has traveled with you.
Yes, when we've done some domestic travel, I was instead of flying there, I would actually drive there, and I turn it into a work vacation, if you will.
Exactly.
So it's been a good benefit for us.
Would you homeschool along the way?
Sometimes, yes, and sometimes no. I mean,
just 2 years ago, we went down to Virginia, down to Williamsburg, and we chose that because it was the historical significance of it.
Yes.
And that was actually built into other lesson plans for them. So
wonderful.
Yeah. So
How unique.
Yeah.
What a great
Jamestown and the whole battle at Yorktown. I mean, all this great stuff.
I've been there. It's wonderful to see that.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful thing. So here you are traveling with your families, and sometimes they can't go with you, so you're home.
Right.
How much time do you have to spend in preparing a curriculum for your children? I mean, you've got different ages, so you've got to teach different levels.
Yes. That's an interesting question. We chose, early on, I kind of did an eclectic approach, as they say. I would use some of Seton homeschool, some of Mother Divine Grace, some of Catholic Heritage curriculum, and say, this is what I feel my children need and want.
Okay.
And then when our oldest became a high schooler, we enrolled in Mother Divine Grace School. And so that was a program, we are enrolled in this homeschool program that I send grades to. The children have online Adobe Connect classes that they can do. Other people grade some of their work so that they can, write papers and not just have mom grade them. So, yes, it took time, but to be honest with you, Mother Divine Grace had these syllabi all prepared. I trust the work that they
and that's
provided.
Important.
Yes.
You knew the quality and the substance you were teaching.
Yes, and it's a classical education. Latin. I've been teaching Latin to my kids from really almost day one, and it's so amazing because even though Latin is not spoken.
I took it for 4 years and I still can't speak it.
But it's amazing. We went to Mundelein just last summer, and the new chapel. And maybe it had been the old chapel, but up on the top of the, there's all these Mater Ecclesia, Mother of the Church, Mary, all the names of Mary in Latin.
Oh, wonderful.
And Star of the Sea, and the children are like, oh, I know that, Mom, because of their Latin. Now, they didn't know every one of them,
right.
but
they recognize it.
They recognize
that
them.
Name recognition.
Yes.
Yeah, and like now when we sing the Regina Caeli instead of the Angelus, we sing it in Latin and at home during lunchtime.
Beautiful.
And so they kind of like it because it's even shorter than the Angelus. And it's a song, and if you know our family, we love to sing.
Yes, you're a singing family.
So that's a great blessing.
I have the sense, tell me if I'm I'm wrong, but I have the sense that you probably did the majority of the homeschooling, but you could jump in at any time, Steve?
I help out with occasionally with helping with the spelling test in the evening. I actually taught a couple of my older children their chemistry and physics because I actually graduated chemistry and physics minors in college. I taught high school for a couple of years myself, actually, a long time ago.
Okay.
So, but Pam does do the large majority, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but that's a good compliment.
Is it?
That's a good compliment. And obviously, you were willing to make the sacrifice of leaving your position, and that had to be a joint decision.
It is.
You had to pray about that and really come to be a kindred spirit, one heart, to really come to that decision and know fully that you're resting in the Lord with the right decision.
Exactly.
One of the things I always tell people is that when you make the decision as a couple to homeschool, whatever you have in your marriage, you're going to get more of.
Yeah.
If you have harmony, if you have peace, it'll actually bring more of that. But if there's already discord, it's going to create even more of that too. So first get your marriage right, and then you can move forward.
Exactly.
It's not something that a woman can just do on her own.
No.
If she doesn't have the support of her husband.
It'd be very, very difficult.
Yeah.
You know, everybody doesn't have probably the educational degree that you have. Is that a drawback to be homeschooling?
No, it helps in certain areas, but there is so much assistance right now for, even in the Grand Rapids area, we are really blessed in this area of number of, not only our co-op at St. Isidore's, which is really an enhancement. They're enrichment classes. They aren't necessarily meant to be full-blown classes, but now with Sacred Heart Academy having some classical enrichment classes for high schoolers. There's a homeschool building not far from here, actually, Clyde Burlingame in 54th, that provides, if you want your child to take a chemistry class, because you don't think you can teach chemistry, you pay someone.
That could be an adjunct and you go into there.
You pay someone to teach that class. Okay. And we're blessed to have a huge band orchestra program, so our children have been involved in bands and orchestras, handbells, choirs, and even a homeschool performing arts. So all that is really available here in Grand Rapids. We're very blessed.
And more.
And more. So, so there are times you have to say,
you know,
stop.
You're intricately involved in homeschooling. I want to talk about your journey now from being homeschooled and doing homeschooling to really becoming part of a greater organization, the co-op.
Yes.
So my question is this, you homeschooled starting at what, in your first child was 4 years old?
In kindergarten, 5.
So you've been homeschooling for how many years then?
She's 24, so it's
Basically about 20 years now.
About 20 years now. During that time, did you feel a need to go out and try and preach this to other people, or really to bring this alive in other areas?
You know, it's interesting. I would never tell anyone that they would have to do it. And it was interesting one time someone said, well, yeah, I remember you saying that a long time ago. I'm like, oh, if I said that, I would not want anyone ever to feel like I was saying you have to homeschool your kids. Right. It has to be a calling. It was a calling for Steve and I. It was a calling for me. And so that's a part of it.
Let me emphasize that too, because you both prayed about it. And I hope our listeners, our viewers are hearing this, because it really has to be of God. Yes. It has to be a God calling you to this. Yes. And that's the important part. So continue on. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Yeah. So anyhow, when we made that decision to homeschool, every year it really has been that decision, is this what God wants us to do this year? And because there are some families who homeschool some of their children, and some of their children they put in school because of the needs of that individual child.
Exactly.
And you know, there was a time where, well, no, we're just all going to do it. And our family was like, well, I don't want to have some in school and some not. But as they got older and more involved with their homeschool friends, some Catholic and some not, it was like, well, no, I really don't want to go to school anymore. I like what we're doing. I like the freedom that we have, and I like the values that we're learning. Yeah. And so that's basically for us. How's it been?
There's one question I meant to ask, because I think it's important. You really have to be somewhat of a benevolent dictator to make sure you're up in the morning and get working, because
well, you know, there are a variety of homeschools out there.
Yeah.
And my kids go, yeah, they think we can sleep in and do school in our pajamas. No, that's not how we do it. Yeah. I mean, we've basically been out, and this is late for many kids in school, I know, but you know, 7:30 we're up and breakfasting and getting the school morning going. Yeah. So it's, I tend to be a little more of a night owl, and so getting up in the morning sometimes is more of a challenge. Yeah. But we do that, and that I have to be the dictator because I went from teaching 1 to teaching 2 to teaching 3 to a point where I taught all 6 kids at once. And then finally, 1 graduated and now was at 6 for a while, and now at 5. And this year we'll graduate our 4th child from high school.
What a blessing.
And
what a blessing.
And amazing.
And Steve, you in business, I know you're disciplined in your work too. You have to be. So that really is a beautiful trait you pass on to children, because that discipline and that I shouldn't say the rigidness, but they need that constant building up of what they're doing and being dedicated to that time and effort they're putting into it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So here you are, you're homeschooling all these kids, but somehow you get tied into this co-op.
Well, and
what happens?
That happened actually, was it the fall of 1999? I have some notes here.
Okay.
There was a group of homeschoolers in the Lowell area, St. Mary's,
Okay.
in fact,
Sure.
and they had been involved in a co-op there. It was a Protestant co-op, and they're like, there's enough of us families that we can do something ourselves. And as Catholics, and St. Mary's School had closed just a
Yes.
few years prior to that. And so they had approached Father George Feckety and said, can we use the school building 1 day a week and get families together and have just enrichment courses? And so, art and religion and gym or whatever. And he was so gracious and said yes. And so and it was really interesting because the first year we did it, we had like 8 hours of classes.
Oh my.
And that was really hard when you have, when you send your kids to school, they're 5 or maybe they're preschoolers, but they only
Right.
go for a couple hours a
Right.
day. Here we had whole families for 7, 8 hours. We had a lunch period in there, and soon we learned that was too many hours of the day to have little ones, babies away from home and stuff. So
Were dads involved too? Were you?
not really. No,
No.
it's been just mostly the moms.
Okay.
And we all brought gifts. I at that time I'd just taken Catechesis of the Good Shepherd training.
Yep.
And so I brought that gift to preschoolers. There are moms who have science backgrounds, went to college to become a science teacher, may have done it for a while. They could teach science. Some who had physical education backgrounds or music. And so we all, in that co-op fashion, said, we'll all teach our gifts and what we are good at, and some will be good but just being the nursery coordinator.
Is there any guidelines or is there any restrictions in homeschooling that the state puts any mandatory requirements on the people who are teaching?
Yes.
Okay.
We're blessed here in Michigan.
Yeah.
We've been obviously through a long history of homeschooling and having to actually fight for the right to do that.
Okay.
Started off with a couple winning a court case back in the 1980s.
Okay.
To now where it's written into the educational school code that we had the right to homeschool. And the only provisions is that we educate, I think, in mathematics.
The core curriculum.
Core
Yeah,
curriculum,
core curriculum,
Michigan
so-
history, things like that.
Right.
And so what we always took our classes to be enrichment. So it may have been an art class that didn't necessarily need a core teacher. I mean, it was more, we have typically met 10 weeks in the fall, 10 weeks in the spring. So it's
Okay.
not meant to be a school.
Okay.
It's meant to be enrichment all along. It's meant for our children to get together with other Catholic children, have fun in a classroom, see what that classroom setting is about.
Sure.
Learning what it's like to hear somebody else teach you instead of
Exactly.
just mom. And so that's always been our really goal, is to provide an atmosphere of learning and fun.
Yeah.
And so
Because
since day one.
learning should be fun.
Exactly.
Because if learning's fun, you absorb much more.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So here you are in this. You're in Lowell. You're at St. Mary's, but things are going to change again.
Things are going to change. St. Lowell is kind of far out for people from
Yeah.
Grand Rapids.
It's about 15 miles.
Yeah, let alone for people who want to come from Grand Haven.
Right.
And so when we started that co-op, it was about 40 families or so. And as the years continued, some people put their kids into high school, because we only went from basically nursery to 9th grade
Okay.
back then, because of the space. There wasn't that much room even for that facility. And then there came a time we were down to about 20 families. And I had taken direction of that in that last few years when we were in about 20 families. And over the summer, and this was the summer of 2010, I looked at our roster and said 17 families. That's really hard to create enough classes and enough teachers. And we always would say, you teach for 2 and you could have 1 off, meaning we would have a group of moms who would maybe study a Bible study, some would go to adoration. I mean, just to feed their soul
Sure.
during that time. And the numbers were just like everybody was having to work every hour in order to make that work. And prayed, and God, what are we going to do? St. Isidore's had closed its school 2 years prior. And we'd always said, heart of Grand Rapids, great facility.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where God's calling us. So, and Deacon Jen, you kind of know me. I do a lot of things.
You're a take charge.
I'm a
Don't
take
worry
charge
about
woman.
it.
and yet I felt the Holy Spirit hamper me. I felt the devil saying, "Oh, don't do that. Don't make that phone call." It was kind of this fear in me, and I'm like, "What is this all about?" So I said, "No, I'm going to call."
And we know fear is never of God.
Yeah, it's never of God.
No. Yeah.
So I called Catherine Muldrink, who I knew actually homeschooled, even though she's the director of faith formation at St. Isidore's.
St. Isidore's.
I said, Catherine, what about this idea? Do you think we could change what we called it Christ the King School at St. Mary's? And it really wasn't a school. We didn't want to be considered a school, but change it over and bring it to St. Isidore's. It's the heart of the city. We have families I know from Grand Haven would want to come up in Cedar Springs.
And that's an easy drive for them too, right off the expressway.
Yeah. And it was one of those, we got to really lay low. Well, let's see what Father Don Lomoshevitz will say.
Of course.
So then I got my back up and I called Father Feckety and I said, because he there was retired living at St. Isidore's, I said, you've got to pray for us. You helped us start this thing back at St. Mary's. Let's pray that it can come to St. Isidore's.
Yes.
So in the summer of 2010, when I had 17 families and we got the go-ahead to do this, we started the fall with 52 families.
With 52?
52 families.
Praise
From
be to God.
17 to 52.
Now that is God's providence
And it
there.
was, actually 54, and 170 students.
Isn't that wonderful?
And well, that was a little bit more work than I had anticipated. I'm
Careful what you wish for.
exactly, because now I'm the director of all this, and and I have a background of that. I have a master's in college and university administration. I mean, that business sort of administration background is kind of a gift I have, and I enjoy using
and you're
it.
utilizing it wonderfully.
Yeah.
So you've got 52 families, is that what you're saying?
52
52
families.
families from all different parts of the city, outside the city?
Yes.
Where's the farthest one from?
Lake City, what's north of even past
Nuevo?
Springs?
Nuevo?
Yeah.
Oh, Nuevo, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, they come a distance
So
then.
Grand Haven, Lake Shore, some in Lake Odessa. At one time, that family doesn't participate anymore, but Lowell area,
Okay.
Belding, Greenville, and in Greater Grand Rapids.
What's been your experience with of the other families that homeschool?
We're all really different.
Yeah.
Yet we all love our families.
Yeah.
We love life. We're open to life. I mean, that's been a constant. I mean, Steve would say he reverted before we were married. We met and we were, as Catholics in a Catholic church, and that's how we met at Michigan State. But the homeschooling, starting to listen to the Scott Hahn tapes, starting to open up, the catechism with the kids in our religion courses. I mean, I had to teach this now, something that I never really had known myself.
So it started to become real.
It became real.
Yeah.
And so that was such a key to enriching our own faith, enriching our marriage, and the marriages that we see in the families participating.
Yeah.
So.
And I would suggest, and I know I'm going to be right, that they're all strong faith-based families.
They are.
Yeah, that would be the whole catalyst for the whole thing.
Exactly.
That strong faith-based, because it's really an understanding of our children being our most precious gift, the one that we're to guard and nurture the most in our lives.
Yeah.
What a blessing that is.
One thought just came to my mind is that one thing that we as homeschooling parents really took to heart was the church's call that we're the first educators of our children.
That's right. Steve, that's what we say when I baptize babies. I always say you're the first and best teachers of your children, and they have to accept that obligation. That's what you are. You're the first and best teachers for them.
I hope I'm the best.
Well,
I'll be honest.
By God's grace.
We make mistakes.
I say that's why they put erasers on lead pencils. We keep making mistakes, but that's okay as long as we know we make them and we can adjust.
Erasers of confession, they have something in common,
That's
don't
right.
they?
That's right.
And so I want to just go back, because when we went to St. Isidore's, it was really the perfect facility.
Yes.
There was adoration, 24-hour adoration, so that moms when they had their hour off, and even some dads, because we've had dads participate because the mother was the main bread provider, and so the dad was doing most of the homeschooling. There's adoration right there. A nice gymnasium for us to, because gym has always been kind of the a fun part for the kids. Get that exercise in, get some, organized sports. Not everybody gets their kids involved in team sports, and so being able to have a little fun and learn how to play volleyball the right way, or basketball skills, or floor hockey, or whatever.
Let me ask this question with the time here remaining. How do the kids pair up academically?
It's a great experience. We divide them up. We have nursery under 3. I teach and work with a lot of the preschoolers, 3 to 4-year-olds. Okay. Then we have kindergarten, first graders, second, third graders, 4th, 5th, and 6th, and then 7th and 8th, and then our high school class.
How's the graduation rate for high schools? 100%? 90%?
Well, everyone that participates ends up graduating. And this year we had, I think it was 12 of seniors graduate. Our daughter is part of that group. Yes. And the bonding that has happened with those high school homeschoolers. Yeah. Because sometimes it gets really lonely when you're a high schooler.
Oh, sure.
And you know of kids who are having events as high schoolers and you're not. And here, there's been like 40 high schoolers. So it's 9th through 12th grade.
And the reason I ask that, Pam, is because many people say, well, they don't get the same quality education or they're not prepared for college. But I found that to be absolutely a myth. I find that homeschoolers are more prepared than any of them coming out of any high schools.
And it's really interesting because I would say we have you're going to find it more so than in the public school. But if there's some kids are going to go into the community college, we have some kids going right into college, some who are discerning priesthood or religious life. Sure. And that's what we're trying to foster. Yeah. That's what that building was for. I think years ago, there's so many vocations came out of St. Isidore School.
Thing. And it's important that the men are there to support these children too, because that really fosters this understanding of man and wife. It fosters understanding of male-female, and it really gives them a profound understanding of the role that we're to play, the complementary roles in the church. Yeah.
So let me just tell you, just so that our listeners really understand, we go on Fridays, 10 weeks in the fall, 10 weeks in the winter, basically, and from 9 till noon. So we have 3 class periods. We have a snack time. We start classes with prayer in the morning. Everybody's in the gymnasium. We all pray, give announcements, and then each of the moms and dads teach up there. We always have 2 or 3 teachers, kind of like that virtues training. We don't have single adults with our kids. And they go from class to class. So like 3 classes they basically have. So there's religion or art or science, and our high schoolers do apologetics.
So they're really getting a sense of being a community and building it too. Yeah. I wish we had more time. It seems so short when we're sitting here. Yeah. But I can't think of 2 better people to really being homeschooling their children and to be leading this co-op, because I know you'll be faithful to God, you'll be faithful to these people, and it's truly a ministry for you.
It is.
It's a calling, and God has really brought to fruition the great works that you're doing. So I thank you both really for being here and for being the people who you are.
Oh, thank you.
It's been a pleasure to have you here, Pam. What a joy to have you here, Steve. It's a pleasure to have you, and I wish you the best with your children and to continue on with the co-op. And as always, I want to give all thanks to Jesus Christ, and we always give him all the praise in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.